I'm here today with the award-winning activist and best-selling author Kübra Gümüşay. I'm delighted that you're here. You gave a talk at the next stage, Next 22 today, and now we're here on the next show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Ina.
Could you quickly describe what kind of activist you are for the people who don't know your activism?
So in all my work, what I try to do is analyze the patterns, the things that surround us, and try and find out how they are responsible for the many injustices we face in our respective societies, and try and connect the individual responsibilities we have with the individual responsibilities we have. And this sounds very abstract, but when it forms into the analysis of injustices such as racism, sexism, the climate injustice, and all of these movements, it really does help to have a more theoretical approach to it and then to connect it to practice. And then sometimes the activism is brought into a book. It could be a campaign, it could be a talk, it could be a project, it could be an initiative, it could be study. And these are all different various forms. You can sort of help society grasp what it is that surrounds us and also open slightly the door of alternative futures.
What background do you have to get all this information together?
I'm a political scientist by training, but I've started very early on with activism in journalism, in politics, started off as a journalist, have been a columnist for many years, but I've always loved writing about things, but never just cling on to the table, to the desk, but also go out onto the field and actually experience and test out theories and ideas to have a more holistic understanding of the topics that I am dealing with.
What is your latest project you're working on?
After many years of having spent time and resources to try and analyze what surrounds us, I now see that people have become quite lethargic, and I want to contribute to the construction of what could be rather than just the deconstruction of what there is. And I think it's crucial and absolutely of utmost importance to analyze what it is, what is there, to closely understand it, to closely investigate and reevaluate it. But I also think it's crucial to create rooms where we can practice alternatives. And so at the moment, and this will surely go on for many years, I am looking into real utopia, so places in the present and the now, but in the margins of our respective societies where people are already trying to implement alternative values, norms, ideals, try and put them into practice. They're called real utopias because they are real, they exist in today's world, but they're utopian because they don't adhere to the norm of their respective societies. So I look into those, but I also look into psychology and other forms of studies where scientists have over centuries tried to analyze what our future visions are and what kind of impact they have on our now. So through the analysis of both, I'm trying to hopefully contribute to a discourse on how all of the ideals we proclaim to have could potentially be put into practice.
Your latest book that was released in 2020, I think, was about language. In German it's called Sprache und Sein. In English, language and being, I think.
Speaking and
being, sorry. And I think this utopian focus now and the focus on language goes together in a very interesting way, because how do you talk about future kind of shapes the way we think and maybe shape our future in reality.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even discuss alternative futures, right? So the discourses we are having at the moment on the future are very are very much dominated by either tech gigantic companies, you know, saying that AI will be the next big thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. I mean, it is us people who decide what kind of future we want to live in. It doesn't have to include that in its massive impact, as they are saying it will be. And so there was a beautiful talk, I forgot his name, but I'll tell you later on, so you can include him in the description. A Dutch writer who talks about decolonizing the future, that our future is already colonized by capitalist companies and industries and systems who say what we will be expecting in the future, and that we need to decolonize the future, that we need to open the door, that alternative futures are available, that those are possible. And so, yes, like you said, the very fact that we now open the door, the room to speak about alternative futures is in and of itself an act of, I would say, rebellion, and opens a lot of doors to new possibilities. Yep, but there is a lack thereof, and I hope that and I know that hundreds and thousands of people are working towards overcoming this.
It's also a direction I wanted to point to with the Next 22 theme, Hug the System, because I think that understanding the system, as you just described, is the first step, and then trying to change things, ideally like from the within, but you can't change a system if you don't fully understand what is actually going on. And I think language is a very important point, as you described. Maybe you can give one or two examples you talked about in your speech at Next. How is language shaping the way we see our present, and how it might change the perception we have about our future?
So one of the most inspiring examples that I found while doing research for this book was the language of the Potawatomi, a language almost extinct, very few people speak it, a language that is almost extinct because indigenous people were prohibited from speaking it. They were abducted and forced into schools where they were separated from their families, and were unable to learn the language and carry on the knowledge of the ancestors. So this is in the US, in today's US. And Robin Wall-Kimmerer is a botanist and a scientist who is part of this community and learns the language later on in her life. And one of the most beautiful examples she's given is the word purpuri. Purpuri describes or means the force with which a mushroom pushes itself from the ground up to the sky. And what's beautiful about this word is not that there's a specific word for a specific phenomena in nature, but the very perspective from which you observe this phenomena. And it is from the perspective of Earth. You watch how this mushroom pushes itself away from Earth up towards the sky, passing by humans who believe themselves to be at the center of the universe. And this is not a coincidence, because the language of the Potawatomi not only use he, she, it, but many more pronouns for all these other living beings around us, from mountains to water, to insects, to plants, to trees, to animals. They all have their own perspectives within this language. So people who speak this language naturally don't look at the world through human eyes, but know that a tree that they're watching is watching them back. And it really does something to your mind when you take a walk outside and imagine the clouds watching you, the trees watching you, the insects watching you, and to then maybe have a different perspective on yourself and how you act and how you sustain your life. And I love this language and this example because it really does blow your mind, but also is proof of how limited our perspectives are in the languages we predominantly use. And then a lot of questions follow. What if we spoke a language like that would allow us to watch ourselves from the eyes of plants, insects, from the eyes of a fly? And I think this helps us to reevaluate our power, to truly understand and grasp our power, and then also wonder, what if, without having that within our grammar, ingrained into our grammar, what if we spoke like we were able to take on that perspective? How would we work differently? What kind of products would we produce? How would we maintain our lives? How would we interact with one another, with nature? How would we speak? How would we live and be? And these are fundamental questions that I think we would answer differently if knowing that we are being watched in a beautiful sense, not like Big Brother observing us, but truly that there is a response to what we do. There is a consequence, and there are beings who see the consequences. Other humans might not, but it is being seen. And Robin Wall Kimmerer has a beautiful phrases. I am being known by my home place. This is, when I read it first, it was so beautiful. And when you fully understand it, it means I am being known. I'm not an anonymous blip on the landscape. I am known. And whatever I do and the actions and inactions of me have consequences, and those are known too.
Yeah, it has a totally different consequence for you interacting with the space around you with a different form of respect.
Yes.
I'm known by my home place. Because you have to think a minute about it if it's not a known concept for you. Yeah, amazing. Do you think we need different ways to talk about technology as well?
Yes. I was quite enthusiastic about a lot of technology when I was in my early 20s, because I saw how a lot of gatekeepers were passed by, how new discourses were possible to conduct in the public. A lot of things that were unknown to me were all of a sudden possible and accessible. So there was a lot of disruption in a positive sense, in a constructive sense. And now we stop questioning the very existence of these platforms. I mean, do we truly understand what it does to us to have political debates on, say, Facebook, Twitter, elsewhere, where you always have someone's picture and name next to it? What does it do to us? And what does it do to us that you comment under something? Or say, what does it do to us that whatever we write is there forever? Without sort of time and space are unknown factors within that space, because it exists without its context. It exists regardless of when it was written. It doesn't age, it doesn't change, it doesn't look dusty and old. It is like it was written in that moment. And it does do something to us. And we can have endless debates about what it is, but we don't have these debates. We don't discuss the consequences. Like these very little things, we have debates on algorithms and their impact and injustices that are being reinforced by, say, Google search images that remanifest racism, sexism, etc. These kind of debates do exist, but one, they don't exist in the mainstream. Two, that we haven't fully grasped the impact those technologies have on how we portray ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we position ourselves within our respective societies, how we interact with one another. I mean, normally when you would have, you've just conducted a conference and there's this big room and you have a stage, and there are debates on whether or not there should be a stage, or is it more constructive to have people on an eye-to-eye level, or people are breaking up norms of when to have question and answers, how they speak, and all these things are being questioned and disrupted. Online, these are fixed, and you don't have an influence on it. The stage is set, comments are below. there's always the picture of someone and their name to it. So whatever they say is like tattooed on their face. It is a different form of speaking. It is a different form of interacting. And this is just one example of all the things we could possibly discuss and wonder about. So the water, the architecture of our online communication is not thoroughly investigated.
Yeah, and it's probably not even possible to investigate all of it, because now there's so many structures, and by some means you don't even know if the people who build it still know what lies underneath.
And they might not have had a concept while doing so. They might not have had a certain idea. But still, I mean, we all know that we sometimes do something unintended and then it has consequences we never would have dreamed about, and neither in our most beautiful nor in our worst nightmares. So knowing their intentions could help, but not necessarily.
Yeah, it's a big question. If everything that happened now was intended 10 years ago, I doubt it.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't just thought through. And I think going back to utopias, it's an interesting thing to say, these are utopian ideas. I mean, 15 years ago, it was kind of utopian that people could connect all around the world and had like all these exchange, and you could stay in touch with your friends. This was kind of utopian and kind of got the wrong way. What kind of utopias do you look at, and how do people think about this consequences that their utopia might have?
So I share the fear of pretending that whatever space you create is the ideal space, the utopian space, because you can never fully know and project the possible outcomes of that. So the places I have visited, the people I have talked to, have made small changes and then tested them out over time and saw how people's so they were watching the consequences of the changes they were making, questioning them, and always reevaluating, making mistakes, learning from them, making mistakes, learning from them. And those people were a lot more successful than, you know, in the early 20th century. You've had tons and tons, like mushrooms, popping up everywhere. All these utopian projects where there was an overarching ideology, a theory, concept that was very good in theory, but in practice, there wasn't enough space to learn. There wasn't. It is impossible to fully think something through, and because there was an overarching ideology, it could only last for 10, 15, 20 years, if that long. And so I think what is a lot more successful is not to have sort of, you know, we'll redo everything from scratch, because a lot of things have worked over thousands of years, and this is very valuable knowledge. And what we need to do is look what is time tested, what has proven to be working over thousands of years, and what clearly doesn't work, say our economy, say the way we interact with one another, etc., etc. And then through small changes here and there, testing them out, finding new paths, and some of them might not work, some of them might look like they're a waste of energy and time, but they are not a waste of energy and time, because every mistake. So the philosopher and quantum physicist David Bohm says, in a discourse, in a dialogue, and I think you can transfer it onto what we're talking about, every time someone makes a mistake, this person does not lose. Everyone gains, including that person, because we now know that doesn't work. And this is very valuable knowledge, right? To know what doesn't work is very valuable knowledge. I mean, a friend of mine, she's a a chemist, and what she does all day long for years is failing, and without failing she will never succeed. So I don't think, well, we need a blank slate and then we'll just redo everything better because we're so knowledgeable. No, we know very little. And I think humbleness is crucial in this. We know very little, but we know that certain things don't work. So we need to create space where we explore alternatives. And we don't have to convince everyone that this is the alternative, but we need to create spaces where we test it out. And then we might come to the realization, well, it doesn't work, but maybe something else will work. But it's not either or. The current system certainly doesn't work. We are destroying everything around us. And now, or, ages ago, we need to explore alternative paths. And people are already doing it. It's not new. People have always been doing it. But those kind of spaces need to grow. They need to get more attention. We need to learn from them. And we need to learn how to become a society that learns constantly, evolves constantly, and not pretends to be sort of perfect and
we're ready now.
Yeah. I mean, 75 years ago, when the German Constitution was written, the authors did not describe reality. They did not look at society and were like, okay, clearly these are the norms of our society and I'll just write it down. It was an analysis of the present. Those were ideals formulated in hope that those will be the norms sometime in the future. But how can we live with the illusion that this is already the norm? Most of the things in our constitution are, if anything, an ideal, but not reality.
When you're talking about making those little changes to change a bigger thing, for me, I feel that especially in the past years, there have been tremendous change. For example, at work, I see that topics like diversity and inclusion are the norm. It's not like some crazy thing that we should talk about in the cellar, but it's the norm. It's something I think you and initiatives that other people started, created and pushed. And this shows for me that it is possible to, like with many little things, change huge contexts. And do you feel do you feel that? Do you look at it and say, all these changes, I did a little part to do this?
Well, I see the because of my work, I guess, I see what's still ahead of us, because sometimes the changes we push for don't lead to transformation, but to maintain the system, the broken system as it is. And then sometimes things are glossed over. And I would say a lot of activists and writers and thinkers and intellectuals and artists who want to work for a more just future and specialize on certain topics don't do that because they believe this is the only topic people should deal with, but because, you need to have a level of expertise on certain topics. But they all need to be, they all ought to thought together. They're all interlinked. And when a company is quite diverse, as in people have different backgrounds, but somehow they still exploit people in Bangladesh, or they exploit nature, then that change is just glossing over problems. So I see that a lot of the time, where sometimes in German, I love this word, I'll try and use it in English, when movements are being swallowed by companies, because they know with little changes that don't change anything fundamentally, they can sort of pretend to have learned and developed and transformed, but they don't transform fundamentally. They don't truly reevaluate their position in society, in this world. Because at the end of the day, what I don't want is to live in a country, in a world where you have representation everywhere, but it's not a representation as in truly different perspectives, conditions, and because these perspectives are also, you know, a white person or the perspective of a black person who is poor and struggles to make ends meet has a very different perspective to a black person who is affluent and has a lot of power. And to pretend that having a black person at a board is sort of diversity is an illusion, because it is not about individuals who represent one factor. It is about learning how to lead, learning how to act, learning how to live in society while being aware of the all various perspectives, watching the consequences of what you do, even if the people, even if the beings who suffer from your consequences don't have any agency, whether they are insects or the water or mountains or human beings, leading in a way where those with least power are also taken into consideration. And when people talk about racism, they don't do it because they want to sort of rise up in the hierarchy within a society, but because they want to question that there are these hierarchies, because they want to achieve a culture that is not oppressive, exploitative, dehumanizing, and destroying nature, but one that is in tune, one that is ready to contextualize one's own perspective. And I know that sometimes it might sound cheesy to say that, but I truly do believe that there's a lot of lack of humbleness. And if people were more humble, and to me, humbleness is a form of emancipation. Humbleness means to know what I know and to be fully aware of all the things I don't know. And that kind of humbleness is like standing at the end of your horizon and knowing this is not the end of the world, and that you are inherently dependent on all the other people who have a different perspective onto this world to widen your horizon, and to understand this necessity of dependence, to understand the necessity of understanding our limitedness, to readily contextualize yourself, embed yourself, and know that you are part of the world. I think there's a lack thereof. And I think we need to learn how to contextualize, how to be humble, how to understand how little we are and how unimportant we are.
Can you describe what helped you to get this humbleness into your life?
A verbal slap on my face. I was very angry, and I was venting, and I said to a friend, well, you know, this hasn't changed and that hasn't changed, and I've spent, 10 years doing blah, 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 and while others were doing la, 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 I was doing this, and they were enjoying their lives, and I was doing that. I was truly complaining, and I felt so, right, and I was so full of myself. I was like, yeah, I've done so much, things should have changed, and I was so angry at everyone. And she looked at me and said, Kübra, you lack humbleness. And I was very startled, because I thought, me neglecting my own needs for the greater good was an expression of humbleness. And now she was accusing me of not being humble. So I was quite mad at her. But deep down, I also realized, no, she's right. And she said, how come you expect that what you do should, in consequence, become reality? You just have two hands, one face, one brain, one set of eyes, two ears, one nose, two legs. You are one human being. How come you have become this egocentric person who believes just because you have invested this amount of years, things ought to be different. And this was a verbal slap in my face, but it woke me up, because all I can do is contribute. All I can do is widen the circle of responsibility that I feel for society, carry as much as possible, but then also know that I'm just part of society, that I take as much responsibility as I can, but I can't expect that things have to be different just because I have done it. To sort of let go of that, always watch the consequences, but don't and always learn and always know, oh, this clearly didn't work, so I'll do something else, but not be angry or mad at people that things haven't gone the way I had imagined things going down. So this is how I learned it, by having a lot of lack of humbleness.
But it feels also that this picture gives you the chance to open up these possibilities to start the change.
Yes.
Because for me, sometimes it feels like these issues that also we discussed at Next today, it's huge. How can you, as just one person, make an impact on these things? But if you have the picture in mind that you just described, it feels that you have your little take on it, and that is enough. You don't have to change the full system, but you can have your little
and the full system will be changed if a lot of people take the courage to do their part. This is how you change it. It's not a top-down thing. It's a lot of people not asking for permission, just doing things differently. And this is how always social evolvement has happened. It wasn't a petition to be allowed to do something differently, and then top down someone says, oh yeah, okay, you're allowed to, I don't know, use a more just language, or you're allowed to be less racist. It is because people practiced. It is because people dared to do things differently. This is how change happens.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Kübra.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you for having me.
Always a delight. Thank you.
Thank you.